Chapter 22, Fire or Blood. 2 days after our arrival, the fleet from Essos arrived on the horizon. We made no attempt at hiding our preparations. The fleet stopped its progress a mile out from the shore. After nearly an hour, a single dinghy was launched and made its way to shore. On it was Illyrio and Aegon, along with Sir Harry Strickland, who was the leader of the Golden Company. They brought several stout warriors with them as well, officers and capable swordsmen all. They were allowed safe passage up the beach and were given horses so that they could be brought to the castle through the massive camp where we were waiting for them. Upon their arrival, they were given an early lunch and allowed to rest. I knew they'd come to make their demands, but I was content to make them wait. I wanted them to have time enough to consider the number of forces they would be taking on, and to realize that the kingdoms were far more unified than any spattering of rebellious assistance they might find within the nobility. I also made a point of having Mehrunes lead Triana and Aelfric on a single flight through the room the men were eating in, just to raise their curiosity. By the time Varys announced to the men that I would see them, they'd been kept waiting another 2 hours. He led the party to the main hall, which was lined with armed and armored lords of Westeros. I sat on a large chair that rested on a raised platform. Below me and to my right and left were chairs that each head of the great houses sat it in. Behind me stood the small council, and stationed around the heads of the great houses, and myself, were the Queen's Guard and Ghost. Mehrunes was perched on my right shoulder, while Triana and Aelfric were perched on my right. Once the delegation were in the room, Varys made his way to stand with the rest of the small council. To emphasize just how prepared for battle we were, I wore a suit of black armor that I had forged over the past few weeks. Its design gave a slimming look, with the metal drinking in the light. The symbol of House Orotum was acid etched into the breastplate. I also wore Victarion's cloak, and its tentacle-like strands spilled over the sides and arms of the chair like a living thing. I stared down at Aegon. He was in his early 20s, handsome, with silver gold hair and purple eyes. He wore a blue cloak and a gold necklace with thick red gems. His black tunic brazenly sported a crest with a red dragon with 3 heads breathing fire. He wore a sword on his hip and carried himself with an air of dignity. My eyes moved to Illyrio, who seemed to understand the weight of the moment far more than Aegon did. Aegon believed he was here to dictate terms. Illyrian understood there were no terms to dictate. Master Illyrio said, addressing him first instead of Aegon, "I must ask, are you unwell?" The question set Illyrio on the back foot as an unsure expression crossed his features. "No, your grace, I am fine." "No," I glowered at him. "You are not. You must be ill. The heat in Essos must have finally affected your humors because I asked that you bring this young man to me with all due haste. And yet, you seem to have taken enough time to gather an army, a fleet, and sail it to our shores. So, I will ask you again, are you unwell?" "Your grace, if I may." "You may not," I interrupted. "I gave simple instructions to bring this man to me with no threat of violence or ill intent, and you responded by bringing an army to my shores. It would seem your co-conspirator had more faith and sense than you." Illyrio seemed to know better than to try and respond. I wasn't going to want to hear much more from him. I focused my gaze on Aegon. "Now for you. Please introduce yourself and state your business with such a large force at my doorstep." Aegon offered a polite bow, his eyes never leaving mine. "I am Prince Aegon Targaryen, son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. I have come to stake my claim as the rightful ruler of Westeros." "No doubt you can see that Westeros has a ruler," Tyrion said as he stepped forward to stand beside me. "A ruler who has been chosen from amongst her peers, no less. Sitting before you are the lords of every great house in Westeros, happily lending their support to their chosen queen. What makes you believe any claim you may have will sway them to turn their cloaks?" Aegon looked at Tyrion, putting on an air of understanding to the question with a smile. "Lord Tyrion, I am Aegon Targaryen, the son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Princess Alia Martell. I was spirited away before the sacking of King's Landing and raised away from the swords of the usurper. I am the rightful king of Westeros. Westeros has no king, Ned said, with his typical doer expression. Westeros needs no king. We have a queen now, chosen by her peers and respected by us all. We especially do not need a king who would claim a dead child's name in the hopes of gaining a crown, Prince Doran Martell spat. He was typically a very understanding and passive individual, but Aegon's claim brought bile to his throat. You claim to be the son of my sister, a child we buried after her murder. A murder, I should add, that our queen recently brought justice to. I can assure you I am the person I claim to be, Aegon replied. I have no wish to upset anyone or dredge up painful memories. I am simply who I am, and my only goal is to unite the Seven Kingdoms so that I can help the people. If you can assure you are who you claim to be, Stannis said as he leaned forward, then you will have proof to back up your claim. Otherwise, you are trying to step into dead men's shoes. What proof can a man have of his lineage when he was stolen away from it, when he was but a child? Aegon asked. Documents, Stannis answered. Keepsakes. The person who supposedly spirited you away would have kept some form of physical proof so that your claim could later be proven. Have you such proof? I have a witness, Aegon replied, his voice sure and confident. A man who was there the day I was saved as a babe. Tell me this, Mace insisted as he tapped the arm to his chair. Even with a witness to confirm who you are, what makes you believe you have any more right to rule than our chosen queen? My father was the heir to the Iron Throne, Aegon replied. As his son, the fall now falls to me. As I understand it, I replied, the throne would have gone to his son and daughter. Viserys may no longer be alive, but Daenerys is, and she has forfeited the throne. Why should the people of Westeros wish to be ruled by someone who is all but a stranger to these lands? And why should I give up the throne simply to appease you? I have been raised to be the king, Aegon replied, his tone calm. I have lived in squalor, gone hungry, been sick. I've worked on docks and learned from the small folk so that I can better understand their needs. I know what this kingdom needs from a ruler to ensure its prosperity. I smiled at him, almost feeling sorry for the young man. He had good intentions, and I could sense the desire in him to do good for the people. But he'd come into a room that had long since made up its mind. Kingdoms, I corrected him. 7 kingdoms, 1 realm, and it is dismissive of you to think that you know what is best for the small folk when you don't acknowledge that the queen that sits before you used to be one of the small folk. I was a bastard, only taken into House Greyjoy because the drowned men foresaw greatness in my future. And noble or not, every Ironborn works the docks, the nets, and the boats. I stood and removed my gauntlets and gloves, then walked down to stand before Aegon so I could present my hands to them. The skin was hard and calloused from decades of hard work, smithing, and battle. I have worked alongside the small folk my entire life, I continued as I turned to walk back to my chair. I count small folk among some of my closest friends. My life has been dedicated to their prosperity and improving the way people see them. I took my seat once more. Do not presume that you alone care for the small folk or the realm. I could name the good many of these lords have done for their people, and the love they inspire their people. So, I will ask you again, why should I give up the throne to you? Aegon looked at me, then looked around the room to take in the mood of those around it. When he finally looked at me, he took a deep breath. I did not wish to have to air this information in front of so many people, but I know the secret of your birth. I do not wish to make it public, but if you do not relent, I will tell everyone, and you will be shamed off of your throne. I raised my brow, and tipped my head. That was interesting. I hadn't expected him to resort to extortion, but I also hadn't expected him to have any information on me to extort. The secret of my birth? I asked, curiosity dripping with every syllable. Who could have told you such a secret? Your brother Euron, Aegon replied. His tone was sure, but also held a hint of regret. He did not wish to follow this path. He had been prepared for a battle. He'd been prepared to do the hard thing physically. But he wasn't the type of person who wished to bring someone down unnecessarily. He'd been raised to be better than that, and this was a situation he loathed. My eyes narrowed at the mention of Euron. I'd been wondering all this time what he might have been up to and what he might have been planning. If he had started telling people about my past, was he working in the background to foment insurrections? Was he trying to manipulate powers in Essos to undermine my rule? Had he possibly joined his fleet to Aegon's in an attempt to help overthrow me? There were a few mumbles from around the room, but Robert stepped forward before I could voice any of these questions and growled, Euron, the man who would have killed an entire house just to take more land? You would trust the word of a turncoat? You do, Aegon said, unperturbed as he motioned to me. Your queen betrayed her family and killed them all. If that isn't a turncoat, what is? Our queen stopped her brothers during their betrayal, Ned said, pointing at Aegon. His expression forced Aegon to stare hard at the man. She put the peace of the realm and loyalty to the crown over her own blood. She saved hundreds of lives at least, tens of thousands at most through the events that the taking of Bear Island could have led to. A king would look at that and find her to be a friend and ally, not a turncoat. What anyone would see is determined through the lens they view it from, Aegon countered. Merida did not kill a single member of her family that day. Lord Greyjoy assures me that your queen is lowborn and that she was taken from her family at birth to keep close to House Greyjoy because of a prophecy from the drowned god. She is no more noble than your stable boys. All eyes turned to me as I stared at Aegon, a gentle smile on my face. I nodded to confirm his story. What you say is true enough. My father, Quellin Greyjoy, stole me from my parents the day I was born. He murdered them and named me Merida Pike. Later, I earned the acknowledgement of King Aerys and was named Merida Greyjoy. I looked around the room to meet everyone's gaze. And lowborn or not, I learned to sail and fight alongside Ironborn warriors. I have guided the Ironborn to become traitors, led the efforts to help the cause of the rebellion, which brought 20 years of peace to Westeros, organized my people to be the coastal guardians of Westeros, and helped to raise every house through faster and safer trade. And I brought justice to those who would otherwise have never seen it. My gaze fixed on Aegon. Tell me, would you have these lords ignore what I have done and proven myself capable of doing, regardless of the circumstance of my birth? Do you think so poorly of them that they would know my actions and yet turn their cloaks simply because of the origins of my birth? Of course, they would have. That is, many of them would have if I hadn't questioned their integrity and honor in front of so many of their peers. Now, if they had decided to turn cloak, they would be seen as dishonorable and disloyal. They would lose face in front of not only their peers, but their liege lords as well. Liege lords did not take kindly to disloyal bannermen. This is Westeros, my lord, I continued, putting on a patriotic air. We do not brook strangers who come to our shores with an army demanding to rule us. And as far as your identity is concerned, I know that you are not Aegon Targaryen, but the son of a whore. How dare you? Aegon's calm demeanor slipped and his brow creased into a scowl. You dare to call my mother a whore? Illyrio shifted uncomfortably, a motion I didn't miss. Nor did the Queensguard. Several other lords must have noticed it as well, because I noticed subtle shifts in their posture. They were ready to draw their swords. I raised a hand and curled my fingers. Lord Varys, please step forward and tell this young man the truth Master Illyrio has kept from him for too long now." Varys moved beside the throne and offered Aegon an empathetic look. "What the queen says is true, my lord. Your mother's name was Sarah. She was a lovely young woman who worked in a brothel in Lys. Your father is Master Illyrio." Aegon looked between Varys and Illyrio, his eyes desperately seeking the truth. "Master Illyrio, why would Lord Varys say something like this? You both told me that I am the son of Rhaegar Targaryen." Illyrio tried to defuse the situation. "Lord Aegon, do not listen to him. Varys has obviously been bought by. Do not lie to the boy any more than you already have," I warned Illyrio, my voice deadly calm. "You can tell him the truth now and save him some heartache, or he will hear the truth from you eventually and draw out his anguish, but he will hear the truth." Mehrunes emphasized my threat by letting out a small roar. Traiana and Elfric joined him in echoing the sentiment. Varys stepped down to stand before Illyrio and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You must forgive the deception, my boy. We wished to raise a man who would be a noble and goodly king. We could not have expected such an exceptional woman would come into the throne who would encompass all the traits we strive to install in you." "And what would you have done had she not come along?" Aegon asked, his frustration growing. "Would you have let me live out a lie, never knowing who I truly am?" "It was a kindly lie," Varys said as a diplomatic answer. Aegon looked up at me. "If you knew the truth, then why did you ask them to bring me here? Why call for me when I'm nothing but the son of a whore?" "Because you have been raised to be a leader," I replied. "Unlike most, you have been specially trained to understand the plight of the small folk and the responsibility of those who rule them. I called for you because I can use someone with your insight. Thus far, your only real mistake was listening to Master Illyrio instead of Lord Varys," I continued, hoping that my reasoning had sunk in. "You let Illyrio convince you to gather an army and try to take this land by force, instead of Lord Varys, who recommended coming in peace and hearing what I had to say. It is not a crime to take poor advice. But now you have a choice before you." "And what might that be?" Aegon asked, shakily returning to a state of calm. "We join you, or we die." I shook my head. "Fire or blood? You can choose to fuel the passion you have, to serve the realm by pledging yourself to my service. Do what you were trained to do, just not from the position you plan to do it." "Or blood," Aegon said. "You'll kill us here and now." "No," I replied. "I'll let you and your captain go. You can attack if you like, but you'll be slaughtered. We have 10 times your numbers. We have the beaches fortified, the cliffs are teeming with war machines, and all of Westeros is ready to turn you into a footnote of my reign." "My captain and I," Aegon repeated. "What about my Master Illyrio?" "He will be executed for treason," I stated bluntly. "He knew the plan was to bring you here to offer you the opportunity to do what you had been raised to do. Instead, he convinced you to attack Westeros. This treachery is a crime no one would forgive, and a monarch cannot forgive. If you truly understood the lessons you were taught, you will know this to be true." Aegon stared at me for some time as he came to the same conclusion. He cared for Illyrio like a father, even though he'd just learned that Illyrio truly was his father. But he had been raised to put the good of the realm above all else, and that meant he had been taught to make hard choices. He saw the situation for what it had been, and understood that Illyrio had betrayed not just me, but also Varys. If he had been willing to betray us, what made him think that Illyrio might not one day betray him? Once a turncoat, always a turncoat, after all. "I understand," Aegon nodded. "Aegon!" Illyrio protested. "You can't be considering letting her. You signed your own death warrant the moment you gave me the advice to attack Westeros and to stop Varys from trying to warn me. Aegon turned on Illyrio, his tone resigned to the inevitable outcome. In truth, you should have seen the queen for the woman she was, for the ruler she so clearly is, and changed your plans. As Illyrio began to protest, two lords stepped in and grabbed him. One forced him down while the other gagged him. He struggled for several moments before one of them knocked him senseless. He turned and looked at me. I choose fire, Your Grace. My life's purpose was to serve this realm. If you have a position for me to do that, I will gladly serve. Sir Strickland cleared his throat. Beg pardon, Your Grace, but I cannot help but wonder where this turn of events leaves me and my men. The Golden Company is primarily made up of Blackfire loyalists and other exiles from Essos, I replied sternly. I am not in the habit of welcoming traitors and families who would regularly challenge my throne back to our realm. You and yours may make your way back to Essos and live in peace. Forgive me, Your Grace, Strickland replied, but I accepted this contract because we were promised gold, lands, and the restoration of our titles. If I go back and tell the company that we will not be, your poor decision to accept a contract before receiving payment is not my concern, Sir Strickland, I cut him off. I'm sure the Golden Company will continue to prosper in Essos once they replace their leader. But I am not without empathy. I will send supplies to your men for their journey home. And in due time, their ranks might swell with newly exiled lords who were prepared to help in this folly. Strickland was terrified. He knew the fate that awaited him when he returned with the news that they had come all this way for nothing. I looked at the man, balding and lacking any real confidence. I took pity on him and sighed. I will be generous, however. You may have your life if you agree to take the black. My representatives will bring news of your death and Master Illyrio's head to your men. I'm sure they'll be happy to return to Essos with their lives. I thank you, Your Grace. Strickland bowed his head. I will gladly accept this offer. Then it is settled, I announced. Have Master Illyrio brought to the beach. I will execute him myself, and we can send his remains and supplies to the Golden Company. With any luck, they'll accept both gladly, and we can put this business behind us. Everyone made their way down to the beach. Illyrio's execution was swift and unceremonious. His head was packed in a box, and I sent Serena to the Golden Company's fleet with our offer. While they tried to negotiate some form of compensation, Serena was able to convince them that the only real choice was to return to Essos. True to my word, I had fresh supplies sent to their fleet so they could make a comfortable journey home. Sir Strickland was taken into custody and escorted to the wall. I took the next few days to thank all of the lords and soldiers who answered my call to aid. It was a week before Alan began to return them all back to their lands. Once we were brought back to Red Keep, I insisted that he take a week to rest and collect himself. While we had returned to the capital and things seemed like they would return to normal, I had to worry about Euron and what he was planning. If he had been willing to share my story with Illyrio and Aegon, I had to assume he was willing to tell others. Whatever he was up to, I was certain it would mean trouble for the Seven Kingdoms and myself. There would also be the matter of handling the nobles who had planned on assisting Illyrio. I would need to consider how best to handle them, since they hadn't technically done anything illegal yet.